Right here. Oh, thank you.
I thought it was gonna go over there and make your head.
Hello, everybody. You're all doing pretty good today. This is a good song.
Country.
Don't say shut up, though. I do like country music. Justin's here today. Adriana's here. Nice.
Jason, what's my
No Chase. Dang.
I'm not here.
Hope Thanksgiving's okay. Chase. Gone for another day.
Hold on, you said something in the group chat.
Tell him that Miss Phil tells he gets better soon.
They're real thick, real thick. Our dad, tire pop, Justin.
Here, wait. Please put your thumbs back. You get your thumbs up. So we're gonna begin. Today is Wednesday, April 17th. Today we're gonna do our day one for Andrew Jackson. We're gonna go into his presidential history. We'll do our DSA in a moment. We'll go over our presidents 1 through 16. Then we'll jump into our slides. We'll accomplish our goals for today. And then technically today, technically it says on there the 16th. Sorry for that, I wrote the wrong number. Today is Wednesday the 17th, which is also the due date for the project. So it says Wednesday 4/16. I wrote the wrong numbers in there, so sorry for that. But today is the due date for the President's Project. Please make sure that you have that completed. If you need extra time, just please let me know. I will help you to make sure you have that little extension to get ready for presentations later this week. And with that, let's jump into it. Who would like to do the DSA?
Me.
We'll have Wayne do it. Let's stand up first. So Wayne, please read us the DSA.
The most sacred of the duties of the government is to do equal and impartial justice to all its citizens. Thomas Jefferson, 1816.
Awesome. Good job, dude. Okay, let's go over our presidents. Parker, you can walk over and you can use the laser. Yeah, make sure it's on. Okay. Everybody looks back.
No.
We're going to go over presidents 1 through 16.
I didn't do it.
It should be on.
No, it was in the middle.
There you go. That's right. It may or may not work. It's not working. That's okay.
It's working.
No, it's working.
It was just on your
Right
eye.
there. Okay, number 1, George Washington. 2, John Adams. 3, Thomas Jefferson. 4, James Madison. 5, James Monroe. 6, John Quincy Adams. 7, Andrew Jackson. Number 8, Martin Van Buren. 9, William Henry Harrison. 10,
John Tyler.
John Tyler. Number 11, James Polk. 12, Zachary Taylor. 13, Miller Fillmore. 14,
Franklin Pierce.
Franklin Pierce.
The man,
15.
the name we shall not name,
And we
James
shall not
Buchanan.
name. What is his name?
James Buchanan.
Exactly. And number 16, our great and illustrious
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. Good job, people. Awesome. Big Parker, big white.
Parker's a little messy.
Yeah, actually, that's something different right now, but we'll do prints in just a little bit, so. I'll let you know when we do that.
Oh, Miss Phil. Miss Orr has some of that flexible foam that you should see if you borrow it.
Possibly. I didn't know she had some of that.
She just got it right today.
Cool. Maybe we can try something with it. Okay, buddy, we're gonna go over Andrew Jackson. So today we're gonna do our day one goal. So we're gonna get to that mark. Hey, gotta please keep your head up. Thank you. So we're looking at Andrew Jackson. Real quick, can somebody tell us what number president he is? Parker.
Is it like 1, 2, 3?
Oh, come on.
It's
Seven.
seven.
Seven,
Yeah.
there we go. He is president number
I
seven.
didn't
So keep in mind the historical context in regards to Jackson. We're looking at almost the later stages of the early republic. So Washington through Monroe, those are the presidents of the early republic. After Monroe, the presidency, the executive branch, starts to spread out in its powers. And Andrew Jackson is one of those key influential people that expands the powers of the presidency and really makes it quite a powerful seat of government and also a controversial one as well. There we go. So again, he is the seventh president of the United States of America. He was born on March 15th, 1767, so not too long ago was his birthday. He died, or no, he didn't die, sorry. I'll tell you his death day in a moment. But he was born in Waxhaw, South Carolina. So he is technically a South Carolinian. But he would eventually move to Nashville, Tennessee. That's where his house will be located. And as you notice throughout your president's projects, many presidents gave names to their houses. Well, the name he gave to his house was the Hermitage. And the Hermitage is the name of Jackson's house. He died on June 8th, 1845 at the age of 78 years old. That's quite old for the standard of life at that time. His party affiliation is Democrat. Technically, he creates a new version of this party as well. And this party technically is still with us today. Anything about the Democratic Party? Its origins come out from Andrew Jackson. He will serve 2 terms. The first one from 1829 to 1832. Please listen back. And then the second term from 1833 to 1837. His wife was Rachel Jackson. I'll tell you about their marriage in a moment. It is quite controversial. They had 5 children together, so I think 2 passed away early on in their lives. So technically 3 really lived out their ages, but the first 2 really didn't have that much of a life. He was a tall person. He was 6'1". So Andrew Jackson, well, that tall maybe, but Andrew Jackson, as with many other presidents, or not many, but a few other presidents, were quite tall. When you think about these people, they had an intimidating stature. And Jackson was a man that had pretty well physical built, by the way. He was a strong man. Well, or not Washington. Jackson was a messenger with the Continental Army in the American Revolution. You just finished that unit not too long ago. And so Jackson is part of the war. And he knows what it means to serve. He served as a messenger. Does anybody know what that means? To be a messenger? Zima.
To like send messages to people.
Yep, so he's gonna be that dispatch runner. He's gonna get a message, he's gonna run it to somebody else. That way they can get that intel, and they can keep up that correspondence, that communication back and forth with officers and soldiers. He was also an Indian fighter, so after the American Revolution, he continued to serve with the Army, not necessarily the Continental Army, but the American Army. And he would fight with many other American officers out in the Western Territories at that time. Now, when I say West, we're not looking at the area past the Mississippi River. The Western Territory at this time is from where the original colonies were on the eastern seaboard, all the way to the Mississippi River. So he's fighting with many American officers against the Native Americans, Indians in those regions. Most importantly for his legacy, he was an officer in the U.S. Army during the War of 1812. Now we'll talk more about the War of 1812 in the future. In one moment. Yeah, I'm not. Maybe they'll call us back in a moment.
That's not nice.
I don't know. Hopefully they give us a call back. But he was an officer in the War of 1812. That war has a lot to do with our nationalist perspective as a nation. It really put us on a strong footing for foreign policy. What that means is how we interact with other nations around the world. The War of 1812 really had a solidifying significance and legacy for our nation in regards to that. And Jackson was a general during that war. His nickname was Old Hickory because he was considered to be a strong-minded man. And hickory wood is quite strong. So he got the nickname Old Hickory. The battle that really gave him his legacy was the Battle of New Orleans, which was fought surprisingly in 1815. So we call it the War of 1812. But fighting actually lasted for quite a bit of time. And the Battle of New Orleans happened on January 8, 1815. He will defeat the British down there in that southern city. And that will be the official last battle of the War of 1812. And it's primarily with that battle that his reputation soars, skyrockets. And if there's something that people really love, it is a war hero. And when you think about our American presidents, a lot of them were once generals or officers in the military. Jackson will use that to his credit to get himself into the White House. Hey, Connor, please, stay away over there. And then there's the signature. Quite simple compared to other president's signatures that I've seen. Some other people have some really fluid signatures. And here's Jackson in his military outfit. Here's his wife, Rachel. Her name, original name was Rachel Donison Robards. Now, it's interesting that she was actually married at the time that she met Jackson. Anybody know what that means?
You cheated.
She was cheating. So she was married to Louis Robards at the time she met Andy Jackson. She did desert her lawful husband, so she's committing adultery. She is cheating on her original husband to be with Andrew Jackson. So already we have our first controversy with Andrew Jackson. And by the way, this would be a point of contention, something that people would ridicule and be accusatory towards Jackson as he ran for president. The fact that he was in a relationship with a woman who was married at that time. So this is another controversial thing, the first controversial thing you know about Jackson. But they do get married eventually, and they have several children together, as you learned earlier. Yeah.
Does he know she's cheating?
Yes. He did know that she was cheating at that time. Eventually, she did get the divorce settled, and they were officially able to get married. But for a period of time, they were seeing each other without the original husband knowing. So again, this is the first controversy associated with Jackson. There's so many controversies associated with this man. When Jackson becomes president, he will take on the leadership of a new party known as the Democratic Party. Technically, he helps create it. And the essence of Jacksonian democracy, as you can see up here, is the idea that he is expanding the power of the presidency to the people. That means that any policies that are going to be created, he wants to ensure that the Congress has a chance to debate those topics. He wants to make sure that people have a say in the influence of that outcome. Meaning, he's not going to send an executive order just recklessly. If a policy is going to occur, he wants to make sure that people have a say in that decision. Now, he does sign several executive orders. We'll talk about those in the future. But for today, we're primarily looking at his background, his evolution as a person to the presidency. This is a quote from him: "The people are sovereign." He repeatedly insisted throughout his administration, their will is absolute. He believed that America, as a republic, should emphasize the democratic nature, the idea that the people should have a say in governmental decisions. He really wanted to ensure that power was given to the people. Before he was a president, he was a lawyer, and several presidents before becoming president were lawyers. That means they have a law background. They traditionally were in the courts, doing cases and such, helping out for defenses or prosecuting teams. For Jackson, after the war, American Revolution that is, he gets his license to be a lawyer. He will start practicing law, and he will migrate to Nashville, which today we know is in Tennessee. But at that time, North Carolina extended pretty far west. Nashville was actually part of North Carolina. It's not until Tennessee becomes its own state that Nashville actually becomes a city in Tennessee. That's a little side fact for you. What he did there. Put up the pictures. He served in 1796 as a delegate to the convention that drafted Tennessee's constitution. So he's a man that's very influential in the formation of Tennessee becoming a state, and also he will be elected as the first U.S. representative of that state later that year in 1796. In 1797, that next year, the state legislature sent him to the U.S. Senate. So his political career really moves quick. And think about his war experience. He's a hero. People love heroes. He's naturally a leader. And so with his credibility, with his influence in creating Tennessee as a state, people loved him so much they wanted to elect him to go to the Senate. But this is an interesting thing. He will resign his office. He will step down from being a senator for Tennessee, and instead he will become a judge of the Superior Court of Tennessee. So he essentially goes back to his law practice in a way by serving in the judicial sector of Tennessee. He will be in that position for about 6 years. So yes, he had that prestige of becoming a senator, but he will dismiss that, another controversial thing, because not many people turn down being a senator. Now, this is a unique aspect about his life, another controversy per se. You don't really see this often, I shouldn't say often, you don't really see it at all in today's society. But back then, duels were quite a typical thing to see or to experience. Wait, please don't be different. Michael, please don't be different. But the political and cultural aspects of America at that time, one of the virtues that people held highly was honor. And if somebody called you out on that, not just on yourself, but maybe one of your family members or something like that, the way you restored your honor, the way you got that honor back was by going into a duel. And does anybody know what a duel encompasses? What's part of a duel? Yes.
Somebody dies.
Somebody might die, but what do you use in a duel?
A gun.
That's true, but yes. Use weapons, guns, maybe a sword or something like that if you want to be very traditional. But typically guns are the main weapon in a duel. And Jackson was quite fond of guns, by the way, not just because of his war experience and stuff like that, but also he was a man that held high honor for himself. Any small thing could have ticked him off and he would want to go into a duel. There is a story of a person in Nashville who looked at Jackson just with a glance of their eyes towards Jackson and didn't like it. So he challenged that person to a duel. Jackson was just that.
Did he say, did the other person take it?
Yeah, they didn't go into a duel. It's one of the many duels that he had. But Jackson would just be that ticked off that quick. Just a simple glance at him that went the wrong way. Hey, Mike, please don't be here. Or Lakeland chair. In 1806, that year will be the most famous duel that Jackson has. And that will be against another Nashville lawyer. And his name was Charles Dickinson. And the reason for this duel, you're gonna find this quite funny, is because of a horse race wager. So because of a bet on horse racing, it causes a duel to occur between him and Charles Dickinson. And Dickinson will accept the duel that Jackson faces upon him. And when they have their duel, I'll show you a drawing of that duel. It's very unfortunate for what happens, of course. Dickinson fires at Jackson. By the way, they only did 8 paces. The typical pace amount was 10. Can somebody please come up here to the front? I want to show you how close this is. We got Parker. So Parker, Stephen Rigger, you're going to take 8 steps that way, okay? I'm going to go 8 steps this way. Can't really do full 8 right here, but this is just about that distance. Now, when you have a weapon, in this case a gun, you're pretty close to each other. What most likely is going to happen when you're that close to each other and you're firing guns at each other? Someone's gonna die. And so Jackson, with the rules of the duel, was not able to fire first. Dickinson did, and that bullet will pierce Jackson just millimeters from his heart. It almost killed him. Thank you, Parker, you can take a seat now. And that bullet will remain lodged in him, by the way. And so he was close to dying. But Jackson will then fire upon Dickinson, and by the way, the gun misfires. Then he fixes the gun, does it again, but this time the gun actually fires, and the bullet just outright kills Dickinson. Dickinson bleeds out from that duel. So that's a very notable, infamous duel that Jackson had in his life. In 1813, he engaged in a gunfight. That also resulted in a bullet lodging in his left shoulder, and that bullet would never be removed from his body. So for the rest of his life, he had this bullet that came from a gunfight that was lodged in his shoulder. And technically, I shouldn't say for the rest of his life, but it was removed from him in the White House in 1832. So for a majority of his life, essentially, he had that bullet stuck in his shoulder. Again, here's that depiction of that duel. If anybody dueled in the modern day, what do you think people would think about that?
Murder.
Yeah, murderers and other things would be weird. Honor is not really a virtue or a value that people really hold highly anymore. And that just shows you the cultural change from back then in the 1800s to today, to the 2000s. Yeah. What?
So how come it took forever to get the bullet out? Like, why didn't we go sooner?
For that question, I really don't know much to that answer. I'll definitely do some research into that. But for some reason, it just remained in the shoulder and he didn't care to take it out that time. So I will do more research into that. That's an excellent question, but it is kind of odd that he didn't really want to have that removed. So we're gonna watch this short video here, and then we will be done with our day one rules.
May 30th, 1806, Jackson and Dickinson. May 30th, 1806, Jackson and Dickinson. In 1806, Andrew Jackson was living in Nashville, Tennessee, pursuing a successful career as a lawyer, judge, and congressman. He was known as an articulate, dynamic leader who would go far. He was also known to be quick to pick up a pistol to settle disagreements. His most famous duel was with a fellow Nashville lawyer named Charles Dickinson. The dispute was over a racing debt, but it became inflamed when Dickinson pointed out that Jackson's wife, Rachel, had never gotten divorced from her first husband. Jackson was determined to kill Dickinson. To that end, he agreed that they would duel at the unbelievably short distance of only 8 paces. The site chosen was across the border in Kentucky, as dueling was illegal in Tennessee. Dickinson was famous for being an expert pistol shot, so Jackson and his second developed a strategy.
Major Overton, his second, had warned him, don't fire first, because Dickinson will get you for sure. You're going to have to withhold your fire and just take your time. I hope you're alive when this happens.
Jackson also had another piece of strategy. He wore a heavy cloak which hid the outline of his body. The moment arrived and Overton began to call out the commands. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fire! Dickinson's shot found the mark. Dickinson could not believe that Jackson had not fallen. Great God, have I missed him? In his shock, he stepped back a pace or two and had to be recalled to the line to take Jackson's fire. Jackson took his time and squeezed the trigger, but the pistol jammed in the half-cock position. Dickinson watched in horror as Jackson calmly recocked the pistol and fired. This time, Dickinson fell, mortally wounded. Overton stepped to Jackson's side and discovered blood dripping on the future general's boot. Jackson calmly said, "He pinked me a little."
But actually, the bullet was in millimeters of his heart. It had struck into his lung and broken 2 ribs, but he was so courageous and had such willpower. No president had more. That he could stay there and stand and fire against Dickinson and actually defeat him. Later, Jackson said, if he struck me between the eyes, I still would have killed him.
Jackson would forever be branded a cheater for his deceptive cloak and for being allowed a shot after his pistol jammed. But he probably didn't care. He would duel many more times and receive 2 more wounds before becoming the nation's 7th president.
How many duels did he have?
He had several. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I'll definitely look into that as well for you, because that's a great question as well. So technically, make sure anyone goes, but real quick, let's try to get 2 or 3 people. Tell us something that you learned about Jackson today that you found interesting, Jessica.
That he had a bullet stuck in his shoulder
Yeah, and when was it removed, or at least what point in his life was that finally removed?
when he became president.
Yes, so for the longest time he had a bullet in him. Okay.
I lived in Tennessee.
Yes, you did live in Tennessee, did you?
Then his wife was cheating on her husband.
Yeah, and that was a controversy that he took very seriously and challenged him to duels, and also was very contentious when he ran for president too. So his marriage itself was also controversial. Justin,
He's got some anger issues.
it sounds like he's got some anger issues, as he's often doing what? Duels. Yes.
But Nashville wasn't different.
Yes. South Carolina at that time. Or, I can't recall, but I say North Carolina or South Carolina. We'll find out. North Carolina. You are correct. Thank you for that. So technically, Nashville was part of North Carolina, and then eventually becomes part of